Education. America's school system has been stuck inside the same structure, but that world has begun to change. By embracing the best ideas from a myriad of disciplines, we are transforming the shape of education. Welcome to MASH Ed Up. Reimagine education.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everybody. Well, we've heard a lot today about the state of education, but I did grow up in California at a time when our schools here were considered to be among the best in the nation. And there were two big cultural forces that really affected the education that I received. One of those was the entertainment industry because of the proximity to Hollywood. And the other one was technology. Sound familiar? But in my day, technology meant aerospace. And there was a place, a very special place, where technology and education came together for me and millions of other kids. And that place was Disneyland. I'm the one on the right. And the place in Disneyland where the lines were the longest and where I always wanted to go first was Tomorrowland. Tomorrowland was where I could ride a flying saucer, meet my robot companion, and see serious scientific exhibitions like this one, the TWA Moonliner, which showed us how we would experience recreational space travel in the far-off year of 1986. This exhibit was designed by Howard Hughes, the world leader in commercial aviation, and Wernher von Braun, a rocket scientist who's been called the father of the US space program. You could not have assembled a more credible team. And how did these two gentlemen say we were going to get to the moon? The same way we were going to do almost everything in Tomorrowland, by using limitless, abundant nuclear energy. Now, these messages were reinforced in my studies, like books like this that were assigned to me in my classroom with titles like, "You Will Go to the Moon." And I was a child, so I believed it. It was also reinforced through further reading and formal study, including these books that were assigned to me by my school librarian that all dealt with how we were going to solve problems in the future, problems that were already becoming apparent, like overpopulation and pollution and resource depletion. And the way these books taught me that we would solve these problems on Earth was by leaving and colonizing outer space. I'm not making this up. So although a handful of people really did go to the moon, if you notice, they all came back to Earth and to the problems that we're facing today. So one question is, what are we teaching when we teach technology? And how do we have any idea that what we're teaching will even exist by the time these kids become adults? It doesn't look good. So what do we mean when we say technology? Now, you are all educators, so if we were in a classroom and we didn't know what a word meant, what would we do? Look it up? So I looked it up, and in fact, the Greeks had a word for it. They had two words. One was techne, which is this beautiful word. It contains the arts, yes, art, and all kinds of skills and crafts, and then logia, which means the study thereof. And I love this definition because it is so big and includes so much of human culture. In fact, there's only one thing that's missing for me in this definition, and that's any kind of context that would be a healthy context for technological endeavor. Because after all, we could create all kinds of very techy things that would be bad for us. We've certainly done that in the past. So what would be a good context for technology, let's say? And I just have one idea of what we might use for a context for living sustainably. And by that I mean living in a way so that we can meet our needs right now without compromising future generations, meaning the kids we teach, without compromising their ability to meet their needs in the future. And here's my big idea for a context. Planet Earth and its physical and living systems. I'm just taking a wild guess. So let's look at how some schools use technology, but in a way that has the Earth in mind. For example, instead of using nuclear energy to power a rocket ship, what if we use the wind? And maybe a project like this one, which is this very cute little wind turbine that a science teacher in England named Jonathan Peel sent us. It's made out of recycled cans, and it generates electricity, and it is so cute. In fact, just compare what it looks like to a big commercial wind turbine like this. These are just some of the pieces of one of those big industrial wind turbines on flatbed trucks being sent through a town in England. And I'm an advocate of this technology. I really like it. I'm not knocking it at all. But it is big, and therefore it's expensive. It's also expensive to maintain. And because it's big, it's really visible. And you know, some people have a problem with that, with seeing big industrial things like this in their neighborhoods. Also, it's centralized, which means it's usually controlled by a small number of people. So where could we look in our context of a healthy planet to maybe find some source of inspiration, maybe just another way or an alternative way of doing it? For example, this is a field of wildflowers. And if you notice, nature does not make one big flower and put it in the middle of a field and say, there you go. You want to pollinate something, pollinate that, I'm done. No, nature doesn't centralize, it distributes. It doesn't isolate, it networks. And this year, these kids have enough turbines made that they're going to start networking them together and figure out how they can generate even more energy collaboratively. And because these turbines are small, they can kind of go anywhere, like on ridges and low rooftops and things like that. Well, we like this idea so much that we took it with us when the Center for Ecoliteracy co-hosted an all-island conference on education in Hawaii last summer. And it was a bigger hit than I ever could have imagined. Why? Here's a couple of reasons. You know that 90% of the energy in Hawaii is imported, mostly in the form of diesel. When you turn on a light bulb in Hawaii, you're burning diesel fuel. And how about this? This is a palleted, shrink-wrapped pallets of garbage on a dock in Hawaii waiting to be shipped here because they've run out of landfill in Hawaii, and now we don't want their garbage either. So this is becoming a national problem like them. So a project like this one that draws from that waste stream, generates energy, can fit in with existing structures so it doesn't interrupt coastline or ridge line, and that's simple enough even a child can do it, is the kind of thing that really resonated with those educators. And being able to identify a big field of problems and finding a single elegant solution that solves many of them, that's the beginning of ecological thinking. Now I'm going to show you one more example, and it's something that you all actually know a lot about, because this has been part of one of the biggest stories that's been in the news over the last several years. This is Hurricane Katrina. And the group I want to tell you about is a group that we love called Kids Rethink New Orleans Schools. Now, you probably all remember that after Katrina, a lot of people were relocated from New Orleans, including a lot of children. And of those who came back, some of them were gone for 6 months, some of them a year or more. And while they were away, some of these children saw certain things for the first time, like school bathrooms that had toilet paper in them, or school libraries with books in them. So they came back to New Orleans determined to rethink New Orleans schools and do it better. The core value for the work that they do is dignity. And that's not something we normally think of when we think of technology, right? Do we ever start with what would support human dignity? But maybe we should, because as the kids put it in their own writing, we mean dignity towards each other and dignity for the planet. They sit in what they call rethink circles, and this is happening all over New Orleans. They're trying to get critical mass with this. So kids and administrators and teachers sit in circle together and talk through issues. So I ask you, are there social technologies that we could include in our definition of technology? They work with framing questions, because you know questions are so provocative and so open-ended. So this is the key driving question for everything that they do. What would a school look like that truly respects its students. So they decided to start with their school food, and they developed 12 recommendations for transforming their school lunch program. And it's one of the best sets of recommendations we've seen, and we've been working in school food for over 15 years. But they didn't just turn in these recommendations like a term paper. They held a press conference. And the Recovery School District in New Orleans adopted 11 out of their 12 recommendations. So I ask you, are there communications technologies that we could consider in our definition, our new big, broad definition of technology, right? But they didn't want it to stop there because they really wanted change and they really wanted to follow up. And they thought, you know, this morning, everybody's been talking about standardized testing, right? And the kids are tested all the time and graded all the time and scored all the time. So they thought, well, you know, we'll just issue report cards on our school food service. So they worked with researchers from Tulane University and did this and held another press conference about it. So things like data collection, analysis, information design, are those technologies? The kids continued to work on projects around New Orleans, including becoming finalists in a national architecture competition to design a school of the future when this happened, the BP oil spill. Now, what could they do? They were just kids, and this was the second big catastrophe in 5 years that had hit them. So they sat in circle and talked it through. One of their first big questions was, who's responsible for this? And here's their answer. We are. We all are, because we all use oil. And you know, when you have a big enough frame of reference, a big enough context, you can start to see connections and understand root causes. And when you can understand root causes, you have a chance of making systemic change. So then they asked one more question, and this is their framing question for their work this year. What would a school look like? What would a school look like that doesn't use any oil? And isn't that a noble line of inquiry for anybody interested in sustainable living on this earth, a planet that is so beautiful that when astronaut Alan Shepard stood on the surface of the moon and saw the Earth for the first time, he broke down and cried right in his spacesuit. Thank you very much.